I think you were after my time then, were you, Geoffrey?
As the master, but as a radio operator in one episode with Carrie of, what was it?
Was it the Ambassadors of Death, maybe?
Thank you very
there
much.
There we go. reaching that. Terrance, you were obviously the script editor from Troughton's era.
End of Troughton, all of Pertwee, and I wrote Tom Baker's first show, Robot.
Yeah.
So I kind of spanned the film, yeah.
And Richard, you were there throughout, popping up now and again throughout Pertwee's tenure as Captain Yates.
As Mike Yates, yes.
Yeah. So
I had a sort of solid block from about 1970 to 73 and a half.
Wow.
right.
The unit,
yeah. And Geoffrey, you of course were married to Caroline John, who was there throughout the first year of John Pertwee's time. So if you, just briefly, can you tell us what your experiences of the great man were? What was John like to work with on the show?
Well, that's right.
Go ahead.
When I was script editing, one of the regular things was, in the early days of rehearsal, I would get an anguished phone call from the director saying, "Terrance, could you come? John isn't happy about the script." And I would say, "Don't worry, John is never happy about the script." And I would then go over to the rehearsal hall and talk it through with him. And sometimes it was a line, that was too gobbledygook and I'd simplify it. Sometimes I'd talk him out of it and say, there's nothing, don't worry, you'll be okay. And sometimes, of course, because John was a very experienced actor and therefore he'd have a perfectly good point. He'd have spotted something that was inconsistent, and I would then sort that out on the spot. But he was difficult, I suppose, probably an actor, a way of doing it. And the other thing with John, I would remember, is when we did the Sea Devils, and there's a bit at the end where the moth seems to have been captured, and is thought to be dead but escapes. And what he's done is put a master mask on somebody else, so they're carried off, and he gets away in the hovercraft, you see. And John and I, had seen all this, possibly for the first time when he read the script that day. And he said, we're in terrible trouble, Terrance. He said, it's just not possible. He can't do it. There isn't time for him to make that transition and do all the things he does. And I said, John, don't worry about it. I said, the audience will never notice. And I don't think anybody ever did, because it's a good, exciting sequence. You see the master carried off then pull the face up, it's not the master. The master zooms away in the hovercraft, waving divisively, it's great stuff. In fact, it's slightly impossible. It's neither here nor there.
Shakespeare did it all the time, didn't he?
Yeah. But
possible.
No, I think the only compliment, John used to call me Shakespeare. He'd say, send for Shakespeare. And, but the only sort of complimentary thing he said to me once, he said, I like working with you, Terrance, because you listen. And that's something I learned from Barry Letts. Always listen to the actors. Don't necessarily do what they want, but listen to them, and that is very important, because, tremendous, it's a job of tremendous strain for them, obviously. Yeah. And of course, the leading man who's carrying the show, the strain is even greater.
But it's true that audiences don't notice, do they? Things like time lapses. If
they do,
if they're following the story. Yes. And my theory as an actor is don't raise questions that the audience won't raise, because there's no point, it may not be strictly speaking realistic to do something, but nobody's going to worry, if the question isn't going to arise in the audience's mind.
Yeah.
Terrance, you've obviously done a few novels and written a few novels actually regarding sort of, I suppose in quotes, season 6B. Do you think, I suppose now that obviously Big Finish is doing as well it's doing as it's doing, and I think still really has the fans at heart, because obviously were created by, I suppose, the fans, that you would ever consider either one coming back to do perhaps a box set of even more Adventures of the Doctor, or do you think you would come back and help them do an audio adaptation of said season 6B to perhaps give the second Doctor the regeneration?
I'm not really getting the question.
Are you aware of what fans call season 6B, Terrance?
Yeah.
Right. And so what Liam
In
is
fact,
asking is,
I've used it quite
Yeah.
a lot in my books.
so here's the question: Would you come to Big Finish and write some stories that would fit into that? Because I believe the Big Finish have now done some stories with someone playing
I
Troughton.
think
Is that the
the
case?
The answer is if they ask me, and if they offer me a contract and a cash advance. then I will do it.
Okay, well, Big Finish, you heard it here on the podcast. Terrance would love to do it.
No, I didn't say
It depends how much he's paid.
Given the right conditions, Terrance would
Yeah.
do.
But I've read some of Terrance, like the Sea Devils, when you mentioned it, I realised I'd read that one. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, he does the audio for that.
So
Yeah,
those
you've
books
done-
are
you've
being
done
read,
several
aren't
of them.
they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you returned to play the Master many times since you were the Master on screen. I guess,
Yes,
I guess
absolutely.
it's much more fun without having all the makeup on.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, no, it's terrific fun. And really the spin-offs for me of playing the Master have been far more than the original job playing the Master.
Well, look at the guy who was in the film, Paul.
Paul McGann.
Paul McGann.
Paul McGann has done about 90 things.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's been an amazing, great fun. Yeah, terrific.
I count myself extraordinarily lucky, actually, having been on Doctor Who at the time that the authors were writing and Terrance was script editing. Because, quite frankly, I can't understand a word of Doctor Who now.
It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It goes very fast, and I don't think there's anything to listen to anyway.
Oh,
I mean, there are no story. Well, that's not quite true. That some of the stories are okay, but we had very strong storylines, and this is what makes the thing last
It's
forever.
quite different. I mean, partly everybody says it's the pace. It's the
Yeah.
pace that they're doing it in one, 50-minute episode or whatever.
Do you feel that is a general comment on television as a whole, or are you specifically talking about it as a whole?
That's what I've heard most about the new book.
Right.
You know, it's not all easy to follow, you know.
But I couldn't believe the last one I saw, because I'm going off to Australia soon with Gemma Redgrave, and so I've been catching up on her episodes, and they all speak as if they've taken some sort of pill that makes you speak extremely fast.
What I've noticed is that they tend to, what I miss is that they tend to rush through the scientific stuff, which is, on the whole, the stuff that really interests me, is just how you manage to, mend the TARDIS or whatever it is, or just how you're going to get through this particular wormhole in space or whatever.
Yeah.
And those things really fascinate me. And they tend to race through those at great rate because the audience, and then slow down tremendously when there's a sort of EastEnders romantic moment to be had, and then they slow down for the personal interchange. I miss I don't want them to rush through that scientific stuff. That's the stuff that interests me.
I mean, don't you think that the Doctor Who at heart perhaps was kind of, it was sciencey, but it was introducing science, I suppose, again, to children in a fun way originally.
Well, it was originally, I can remember seeing the very early ones, and the general public had we all never had been to space. We didn't know what was up there. What did it look like? And so it was genuinely, I think, scientifically exciting to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm completely unscientific, I can just about operate a computer, I can, barely change a light bulb, but, I used to have all about if you can't be accurate, be vague, and if if you say it's so many million miles to Mars and you get it wrong, every schoolboy in the country will write you and point it out. But if you put, my God, man, you realise how many million miles it is to Mars? That's just as good as you're not committed.
But there was a total fascination with being, there was for me anyway, of being in outer space.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, you know, I mean there are some
Oh, yes.
of
Yeah.
those stories in the 70s were kind of set in rocket ships sort of going to the moon and things, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't really fault the sort of the technology of the modern Doctor Who. I mean, it's quite incredible. The effects, I think, are not the best thing
Oh,
on television.
effects, yeah.
But it doesn't substitute for a story. We
No.
didn't have the effects.
Oh, but I think there are some
I
good,
personally
good stories in the modern Doctor Who. I'd swear by the
Well, the early
the
ones,
Weeping Angels and things like that.
Mm.
Just terrific.
the Russell T Davies ones,
Right.
they had a story. I think it's very clever what Russell did actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the very recent one, so.
Yeah, well, that's-
Well, he's
I
back,
only
he's
saw
back on in a fortnight, so
Oh right,
time to
so
catch
we'll
the
see
new
some
series.
more.
And I think the general news is that this season is going to be more in the way of two-part stories. So we might see a change. in
Yeah,
terms of
I
the
think maybe that was
to breathe.
that what we've been saying has kind of seeped through to them, and they
Yeah.
realised, you know, that maybe
Let's
they
have some cliffhangers and.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
I think if you want to build an audience, as we have, that has lasted for 30, 40, 50 years, you need to keep people
On their toes, hanging on for the next episode for a bit. That is a better way of building an audience, actually.
Jeffrey, I noticed that you are holding a book with your name on the cover. Could we tell us a bit about your writing career and what this new book is about?
Well, I started writing, this is the second book that's been published now, but I started writing in the 70s, yes, probably when Terrance was doing lots of Doctor Who's and things, but I was writing my own stuff between jobs as an actor, almost as therapy it started, just writing what I wanted to write, not to any kind of order at all. And because you get so much rejection as an actor, I wasn't opening myself to any rejection as a writer. So I would write it and put it on a shelf before I really hardly tried it. And now finding Phantom Publishing, who are publishing these novels, which I'm actually quite proud of, but they're what I feel and what I wanted to write, rather than written in any particular genre. So this is it's a one-off book. I don't know how to describe it quite, but do buy it and find out. And yes, it's just a man whose house. I was obsessed with progress at the time and where it was going wrong. I suppose I still am, and looking at different civilizations and the way they look at each other and how we would be looked at by other civilizations. And when I wrote this, it was about a man's house that's crushed by a great big roller, like a steamroller comes through the city and crushes it, and leaves a road behind it. And his wife and children have gone, are missing. And it's a dream, really. And he just follows this road called a progress road, and has all sorts of adventures along the way to try to find his missing children. And it's a sort of critique of the idea of progress, of what we're still driving towards technological progress. And it's a sort of exploration of that. So it's an odd book, but
Will there be
read it.
an audio
It's
version?
got illustrations too. Sorry?
Will there be an audio version or an audio book done? Will you read the audio or?
I'd love to actually eventually, but at the moment I'm very happy to see them published and read, hopefully, and see if there's a readership out
Sorry,
there.
what's it called?
It's called The Progress Road.
Ah.
This one, The Progress Road.
And are there more to come?
And then the second, this is actually the very first book I ever wrote, and then I wrote another one called The Forgotten Fields, which is already published and which you can also get. And it's, then I wrote a third one, which I hope will be published in due course. And then I gave it up because I thought, well, I'm not getting anywhere with this, and I really ought to try and get things done. Then I turned to writing plays and writing adaptations of plays, of which quite a lot have been done. There's the unintelligent design, for example, which is a CD,
Yeah, that was done on audio, wasn't it?
CD on audio,
Yeah.
a Big Finish, and I've had lots of other things done in the theatre and so forth. But I was writing plays after that, and it has encouraged me enough to go back to writing. So I'm in the process of writing a new novel, a brand new novel. So we'll see how that goes.
Great.
It depends on establishing a readership.
Well, I think you've got a big market in the Doctor Who community.
Well, that helps a lot, yes, yes, if people are interested.
Yeah, Richard, I recently heard the Third Doctor's Volume 1 Adventures Go. They came out, I think, about last week. With Tim Trelaw doing John Pertwee.
Yeah.
And that was quite something actually, to sort of hear his sort of take on John.
It was extraordinary. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, we were at Big Finish. I've done lots of stuff at Big Finish, which I always enjoy. We all enjoy
we all
going to Big Finish. And we all had separate little booths. And I was sort of concentrating on my script. And I suddenly heard John talking. It was quite extraordinary. I think Tim has done a very good job on that impression. It's amazing. Some of the phrases just. I did one, I can't think of it was called, for Big Finish, in which, with Katie, and she and I both did lots of voices, and I think I had a bit of John at one point, and I found that some of the phrases, I can't quite remember one in particular, which some of his phrases, I find I could do very easily. I found myself really doing it, but to do the whole body of John's speaking is very good that Tim does, and I think that's quite uncanny.
It's quite a gift.
So I suppose that would lead on to my next question, really, to both of you, Geoffrey and Richard. What, for you at least, are your favourite memories of being on the show, or do you have a favourite scene or a time that particularly stands out in your memory that, you know?
Well, what stands out in my memory was the very first day I ever went filming, and Terrance was talking about John being a very experienced stage actor, which indeed he was, and also, of course, therefore, a very good leading man. He was always very welcoming on the show to all the new people who came on. He wanted to know all about our history and our background, so that you can't really, until you know a person, you can't really sort of work properly with him. He was doing his job, and we were queuing for lunch. There's lovely film, out-of-film lunches, and John was just in front of me. It's the first one I'd done, and he was trying to find out about me and what I'd done. And I said one or two things that I'd done. And one of the things that I did very early in my career, I did a lot of voice work for BBC, a lot of radio stuff. And John showed considerable interest in this. This is a story afraid against myself. I'm usually pretty stupid about these things. I'm not terribly good on other people's biographies, or indeed my own. But John seemed very interested when I was telling him about radio. And I sort of waxed lyrical about everything that I had done. And I then advised John that he might perhaps think of doing some radio. I discovered my mistake afterwards.
We're still broadcasting the Navy laugh on Radio 4.
That's right, absolutely.
Can't get away from it.
Brilliant show there. So yeah, Geoffrey, what was your favourite memory, or do you have a particular thing that stood out for you, you know, on Doctor Who at all, or?
On Doctor Who, gosh, it's very difficult. No, I suppose, I mean, the only thing I really enjoyed was playing the scene with Tom Baker, when I could finally, when it stopped being a voiceover on the Keeper of Kraken, and I was just playing with Tom, and I really loved that. It was fun.
I had fun with Tom as well on the on the Demon's Quest 15 CDs we did together.
Ah, yeah.
And it was very, very, very funny, very good fun to work with it.
Yes, you could listen to him for hours.
Mm.
So that's no alternative.
No.
But this is the lovely thing about Big Finish. I mean, they brought us all to life again,
Yeah.
and they've given us new.
Yes.
Yeah, well, they provided an awful lot of work for writers and actors.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm always very impressed with the writing too. It's like,
Yeah.
considering how much they do, you'd think the quality might
Yeah.
drop off, but it's very good quality.
Well, it's been 16
Lovely
16
stuff.
years
I
now.
think there's now really a big finish, and there is actual
Yeah.
Doctor.
There probably is.
Yeah. I haven't kept up with Big Finish lately, but I do remember your reintroduction, Geoffrey,
Oh, yeah.
in Dust Breeding.
Oh
Seems
yes,
cool.
that's the first
And it was
time,
plugged in Doctor Who magazine, and it was marketed in such a way that you were in it because Caroline was in it,
Yes.
and I was completely fooled. And I got to the end of the first CD, which is the cliffhanger where it's like, it's the master, and I was
Right.
like, I have to carry on listening. So take the CD out, pop the new one, and I was just gripped.
Yeah.
But I think part of the reason it works is because the role it was so vocal originally, because we didn't know it was you until the final episode, and then you were Kate and Maker.
Yes, because I got that because I'd done a lot of radio work
Yeah.
just before.
When did you realise you had such an evil voice? Or when did you realise that it could be used in that way, shall I say?
Yes, I had no idea. I think I kind of was inspired because my vision of the master was Roger Delgado.
Hmm.
And I loved watching him. And he was such a smooth operator, and I always quite liked the idea of this sort of really rather urbane, handsome chap who still thinks he's rather urbane and handsome when he's in between incarnations under a cowl and a completely black face. And so I think I started with that silky thought because of Roger, and then I don't know, it developed. It's very useful it's such fun for an actor playing evil parts. It's much more fun than playing the good ones. You can really let the evil side of you go. I've always enjoyed that.
I think that's why, especially again in the play Master with McCoy, with Sylvester and yourself, I think again because of a bit of Big Finish and being able to sort of really develop both of your, not just your character, but I think in general they've developed, the companions and the doctors especially. Sylvester's very kind of, you don't know where he's going to go, very unpredictable. He kind of skirts, I think, almost that line between good and evil because he's sort of very shades of grey in the sense that he's always, manipulating his companions, but for the right reasons, which they obviously don't always perhaps agree with. So you've got that borderline, and then to sort of have you in that role of the fact that you've forgotten who you are, and you play a good in quotes character for a while before you go back to being the master. Was really interesting.
That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's unlike any of the others.
Yeah.
The master doesn't normally forget himself.
No.
Interrupt, because this is really, really important.
Oh, my
Oh
God,
my
yeah.
goodness.
There you go, sir.
Life support.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, everybody.
But I agree with Geoffrey. I mean, traditionally, some of the good characters are a bit on the boring side. But I love playing Mike Yates, who was a good character, because we had a lot of humour in it.
Yes.
And there was always an opportunity, and of course I was lucky enough to have a story which did show a weakness in my character.
Well, it's idealism, wasn't it?
Well, it certainly was idealism, but that was probably the weakness, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's one that you did, I say recently, but I suppose a year or two, must have been a couple of years now back, was the Worlds of Doctor Who one where you were back with Colin and I think it was
Who's this?
Eugene,
Another Big Finish, I'm assuming, yeah?
Danny Ashbrook.
Was Danny Ashbrook?
Yeah.
Was that BBC one?
No, it was Big Finish again. It was still.
I was pretty insulted by Big Finish when they asked me to be Davros's father. That was very unkind.
I thought you were in that
That's
actually.
very good.
Yeah, but not at all convincing, I hope.
Yeah, I didn't know that was that father either. But, I know that Big Finish had explored his earlier years. Yeah.
The Big Finish exploring all the backstory is amazing, isn't it? But I can't keep up with it all. I have to learn it as I go along.
Yeah. I think we are having to wrap up because we're on to the next panel. Just remains for me to thank Richard Franklin, Terrance and Geoffrey Beevers for their time.
Thank you very much.
This is very subject to the rest of you trust me. You're sure about it, right?
Just
There is a step at this end. If I can move back to the
Oh, yeah, that'd be, yeah.
through a seat. Shall I press stop on this for the minute, Tim?